Hey everybody, so in this video I am going to show you how to complete all of the steps that are listed in the assignment instructions. So if there's any part of the instructions that you find to be confusing, you can watch this video and work along with the video, and hopefully it will show you how to do the assignment a little bit easier. So I've got my presentation pulled up, and I've gone to step 1. So it says turn to a blank page in your sketchbook and title it Value in Shading. Okay. So I've got my title at the top of the page. Next thing that it says to do in the notes is copy the notes below. So if we are going to do a project, it's all about learning about value in shading. First thing that we need to do is make sure we understand what value in shading is. So value is an element of art, or art element, that refers to the lightness or darkness of a color. So when we look at an artwork and the artwork only has a single color, or if it's got kind of light areas within a color and dark areas within a color, we call that value. Next thing you need to get in your notes is the definition of shading. So I'm sure you guys have all done shading in the past when you've made artworks and drawings. But have you ever really thought about what it is you are doing when you add shading? Shading is simply creating gradual changes in value to make an artwork look more realistic. Shading is what takes a simple drawing and kind of brings it to life and makes it look really lifelike. Okay, so we are going to focus this year when we do drawing, we're going to focus only on black and white drawings and learning all the different ways that you can add shading to a drawing. And those are your shading techniques. Okay, I'm going to introduce 5 shading techniques to you guys this year. And your 5 shading techniques are blending, hatching, cross-hatching, stippling, and scumbling. Okay, so those are your notes. Moving on to the next slide, it says draw a horizontal line across the page in your notes, and below the line, write blending. If you still have your paper ruler handy, this would be a good time to kind of pull that out and use that. You don't have to have it, but it makes it easier to kind of break that up. So underneath here, we are going to focus on blending. And I'm going to draw a nice little box around that just because that's what I like to do in my notes. Step 3 says create 2 value scales using the blending technique. So a value scale, put simply, is just kind of like a little chart that shows us light areas and dark areas. So I'm going to use my ruler to kind of mark this out so that when I make my value scales, I like my things to be measured quite nicely as I go. So I'm going to do 2 little rectangles. So this doesn't have to be huge. If you want to make it big, you can. But I'm going to make mine relatively small, like that. So I've got one little rectangle, and I'm going to make my next one approximately the same size. Just so I've got two value scales. And we're going to do both of these using the blending method. So I actually have an example of all your shading techniques, well, 4 of the shading techniques all the way done. Okay, so when we do a value scale, you want to gradually go all the way from the darkest that your pencil can shade all the way out to the lightest your pencil can shade. Okay, so we are going to focus today only on shading using blending. Okay, notice that the lightest value is not white. We don't want to leave the whitest value just the white of the page. We do want it to have a small degree of shading. And as you move from one side to the other, you just want to gradually go a little bit darker, a little bit darker. So we are only going to do 4 values, and I like to start with the darkest because your pencil, the lead in your pencil, is really only going to be capable of shading, you know, as dark as possible. Like it can't actually get any darker. So as you're shading and filling that in, I think it's easiest to start with the darkest and then gradually get a little bit lighter from there. So because we're doing the blending method, we're just kind of gradually filling that in with your pencil. And we want this to look nice and smooth. We won't want to see any type of kind of lines within that. Okay, so fill your first box in as dark as possible. And then when I get to my next box, I'm going to go just a little bit lighter than I did before. I think it's easiest to kind of keep all your shading up and down. Don't worry about going outside the box right now. That's not a big deal to me. And then my third value needs to be a little bit lighter than the one before. Now, for me, I think it's easiest to hold my pencil back near the top and shade when I want to go lighter because I feel like it applies less pressure on the paper. So I'm just going to go in and I'm barely going to hit the paper and shade that. So that's going to be my lightest value. So once you're done, compare. One thing I notice is these values look kind of similar. So I'm going to go back and make this just a little bit darker, and then I'm going to do the same thing here and make this a little bit darker. Now, if you want to clean that up when you're done, you can come in with your eraser, and I can erase everywhere that I've shaded outside the lines. Okay, so that's my first value scale where I have 4 separate distinct values, and they gradually go from light to dark. Now, this next one's a little bit more tricky because you have to gradually fade from dark to light, and it wants to be one kind of even shading. Okay? This is easiest done if you don't pick up your pencil. So I'm going to start here on this left side, and I'm going to use the value scale I did at the top kind of as a guide. So I'm going to shade as dark as I possibly can. And then once I start to get to where that line is, I'm going to gradually let up just a little bit. And so the trick to doing this is to control how much pressure you're applying on the paper. So with the blending method, the way that we get light and dark values is really all about how light and dark you press with your pencil on the paper. So the lighter you press, the lighter your values will be, and the harder you press, the darker your values will be. Okay, so once you kind of done one pass all the way through and kind of get that, then you can go back in and I can gradually kind of change that so I feel like my darker values aren't as dark as I want them. So I'm just going to go back and add kind of another layer and get that to gradually fade. Okay, so that's it. It's important to be able to gradually fade from one side to the other, because when you shade things that are round, like in the next step, that's what you're going to want to do. Okay. The last thing in my instructions, step 3, it says to draw a circle and use the blending technique to shade the circle so it looks like a realistic sphere. So if you have something around the house, like a bottle cap, I don't know, the end of your glue stick, the cap on that, anything like that would work. So if you want to trace around something, that's fine. I'm just going to kind of pencil this in and freehand this myself. Okay, so you're going to, I'll zoom that in so you can see a little bit better, hopefully. So you're just going to draw a circle, and we want to shade the circle so it looks like a realistic sphere. So the first thing I'm going to do is really lightly, I'm going to hold that up a little bit closer so you can see. Okay, so let's adjust that. Whew. Okay, so I'm going to draw a sphere, and then I'm going to draw like a little circle. So that little kind of oval shaped circle that I drew right here, this is going to represent where the light is hitting that sphere, and that's going to be the lightest part when I shade. Now, something important that you are going to want to do while you shade is you're going to want to start on your darkest side, and we're just going to gradually fade from dark to light as you get closer to that sphere. Okay, so the trick is, because the circle is round, we want to curve this so it gradually, so it looks like it kind of gets round. So to begin with, my shading's going to look a little rough. Okay, as much as possible, we do want to try to keep your shading as smooth as you can. But until you become more practiced at that, just do your best you can, and I'll show you how to even all that out at the end. So all I'm doing on this back side here, or kind of that bottom side, is I'm just starting, I'm going from dark to light and gradually fading. So notice how when I get up here towards the top, my value is not necessarily going to be as dark as I can possibly shade like it is down here at the bottom. Another thing that's important to do is make sure you are constantly turning and shading from the outside edge of your circle and going to the bottom. You don't want to shade this all the way across. You do want to make sure that you work around the circle and then gradually fade as you get towards the lighter part. And then turn your paper so that you're always going from the edge to the middle. Okay, so once I've kind of started, I have kind of just this like big old white circle in there. I'm going to come in and I'm just going to try to smooth out everywhere you can see the lines. And you want to really darken this part down here that's farthest away from the light. So notice how when I shade, I'm making my pencil lines kind of curve along with this. So that's going to be important to help making your circle actually look round like a ball or a sphere. And then the other thing that I'm trying to do, I would always keep your shading in the same direction. So have it always curve. You don't want to shade up and down like this. That would be bad. Okay, so always kind of shade in the same way. And then now I'm going to come in after I've gone around and I feel like I've kind of smoothed out like my darkest values around. Now I'm going to work from like my medium to my light and gradually get lighter towards that little circle that I drew. So again, you're just going to shade around. I can tell you that shading a sphere like this isn't easy. Okay, it is, you know, kind of one of the more difficult things to do is to really make it look realistic like a sphere. So you just gradually get lighter. And we want to try to make that circle that you drew to begin with disappear. So once I get to here, now I'm just going to kind of take my finger and kind of run that around. And you just got to kind of smudge that a little bit and blend all that so it looks a little more smooth. And then do the same with your pencil. So the last thing that I would do is just smooth this out. And then my light looks a little gray, so I'm going to kind of erase that so it looks a little lighter. And then it's almost like I'm going to shade with my pencil, or my pencil eraser, and make that so it looks a little lighter. So that's it. Once you're done, kind of clean up any smudges you have with your eraser. Go around. So this is the assignment. That's what you want to do. You want to do a value scale that gradually goes from dark to light. Make sure your values do look separate and distinctly different. If not, you might go in and increase those differences so that we can see 4 definitely different values. Do your value scale that gradually fades from dark to light all the way across, and then do a little circle and try to shade that circle so it looks like a sphere, so it gradually goes from dark to light. Okay, email me if you have questions, and good luck. I look forward to seeing how well you guys do with the assignment.